My mom snapped, "You've helped your sister her whole life, so do it one more time." I finally refused and said, "You've called it the last time for years. I'm done letting your empty promises decide my life." I had heard my mom call it the last time so many times that the words had stopped meaning anything to me. There was always a reason it really was the last time. A car payment had gone wrong. A credit card had gotten out of control. My sister had missed rent because her hours had been cut. Her electricity was about to be shut off. Her daughter needed braces. Her son needed school supplies. Her transmission had died 2 weeks before Christmas. There was always something. And every time my mom would tell me that if I could just help one more time, things would settle down. I believed her for years. The part that finally changed was not that my sister asked again. My sister asking was almost expected by then. What changed was that I finally looked at my own life and realized I was making major financial decisions based on promises that had never actually been kept. I was 34 when this happened. I had a steady job, a mortgage, a 6-month emergency fund, and a plan to start saving for a larger house because my wife and I were planning to have kids. Nothing about my life was glamorous. I drove an older SUV that was fully paid off. I clipped coupons sometimes. I waited for sales before buying appliances. I had a retirement account through work, and I was finally contributing enough to get the full employer match. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was getting ahead. Then my mom called me on a Tuesday afternoon while I was at work. I almost ignored it because I was in the middle of a project and knew she usually called when she needed something. I answered anyway. She sounded upset but not panicked. That should have been my first warning. When my mom was genuinely scared, she sounded completely different. This time she sounded like she had already decided what I was going to do and just needed me to agree. She told me my sister Melissa was in trouble again. Melissa was 31 and had 2 kids. She had always been the person in our family who needed a little more help than everyone else. That was the phrase my mom used. A little more help. When we were kids, Melissa needed help with school. Then she needed help with a car. Then she needed help with college. Then she needed help with the first apartment she rented after college. Then she got pregnant. Then she had another child. Then she went through a divorce. None of those things by themselves made her a bad person. That was one of the reasons I struggled with all of this for so long. Melissa was not some cartoon villain who woke up every morning planning to take money from me. She worked. She loved her kids. She could be generous. She showed up at birthdays. She remembered people's favorite foods. She could make my mom laugh when nobody else could. She also made terrible financial decisions and almost never dealt with consequences until somebody else stepped in. My mom told me Melissa had fallen behind on the mortgage for the house she was renting. That made me pause. I asked what that meant because I knew Melissa did not own the house. My mom said the property belonged to our uncle, who had been renting it to Melissa at a reduced rate. She had been paying $1,450 a month. The problem was that she was almost 4 months behind. My mom said my sister had about $6,000 coming to her within a few months from a tax refund and a work settlement. She just needed somebody to cover the immediate arrears so she could catch up. Then my mom said the familiar part. She said it would be the last time. I remember staring at my computer screen while she talked. I was not even really listening anymore. I was thinking about how many times I had heard those exact words. I had actually written them down once. That sounds ridiculous, but I had. A few years earlier, after paying a $2,700 balance on Melissa's credit card, I had started keeping a spreadsheet because I was beginning to lose track. I called it family loans. At first, it was mostly because I wanted to know whether I was being unfair when I felt resentful. I thought maybe I was exaggerating the amount in my head. I was not. By the time I made that spreadsheet, I had given or loaned Melissa more than $18,000 over the previous 5 years. Some of it had been repaid. Most of it had not. I had also paid bills directly for her. That number was separate. My mom always made sure to distinguish between helping and loaning. That was how she avoided admitting how much it had become. She would say something was a gift when Melissa was embarrassed about repayment. She would call it a loan when I asked whether I would ever see the money again. My mom told me this new problem was different. I asked why. She said because Melissa was finally getting stable. She had gotten a better job. She had stopped seeing the boyfriend who had caused a lot of her problems. She was trying to rebuild. I said I was glad to hear that. Then my mom told me what she actually wanted. She wanted me to use $7,500 from my emergency fund. I remember laughing when she said it, not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh people make when something is so absurd that their brain needs a second to process it. I told her that would wipe out most of the savings I had spent years building. She said I would rebuild it. I asked when Melissa was going to pay me back. My mom said she would once the settlement came through. I asked whether there was a signed agreement. My mom got quiet. I knew what that meant. There was no agreement. There never was. I told her I could not do it. That was when her tone changed. She said I had helped Melissa her whole life. She said this was no different. She said I was acting selfish because my sister had children. I told her that caring about the kids was exactly why I needed to stop creating situations where their housing depended on me. She said I was being dramatic. I said I was trying to be responsible. Then she snapped. She reminded me that I had always been the dependable one. She said I knew Melissa had struggles that I did not have. She said I had a stable job and a house and savings. Then she said the part that had been building in her for years. She told me I needed to do it one more time. I finally lost my patience. I told her she had called it the last time for years. I said I was done letting her empty promises decide my life. There was silence after that, not the normal silence where somebody is thinking. It was the kind where both people know something has changed and neither wants to be the first to admit it. My mom hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. I felt horrible, not relieved, not powerful, horrible. For the rest of the workday, I kept wondering whether I had gone too far. That had always been my problem. I could say no. I just could not stand how I felt afterward. I kept imagining Melissa getting an eviction notice. I imagined the kids being scared. I imagined my mom crying. I imagined family members calling me selfish. Then I got home that night and told my wife what happened. She had been hearing versions of this story for years. She knew my family was complicated, but she had always tried not to take sides. That night she asked me one question. She asked me how many times I had heard that it was the last time. I told her I did not know. She said I did. I just did not want to count. That bothered me enough that I opened the spreadsheet. I had not looked at it in over a year. The first entries were small. A $300 utility bill, a $500 car repair, a $900 deposit. Then they got bigger. $1,800 for rent, $2,400 for a credit card, $1,200 for dental work, $3,000 after Melissa's divorce, $2,600 for a car, $1,000 for a school expense. Some payments were marked repaid. There were fewer of those than I remembered. My wife sat next to me while I added the numbers. The total was $31,460. That did not include the months when I had paid my sister's phone bill. It did not include groceries. It did not include the time I drove across town twice a week for 3 months because her car was in the shop. It did not include the security deposit I had paid when she moved after the divorce. It did not include the $4,800 I had put on my credit card when she promised to reimburse me from a tax refund. She had never reimbursed me. I had eventually paid the credit card off myself. Seeing the number made me feel sick. I realized I had been thinking of every incident separately. My mom had done the same thing. There had never been a single giant request. There had been dozens of requests that were each made small enough to feel temporary. I told my wife I was starting to think I had enabled this. She said she thought I had. She also said that did not mean I had to keep doing it. The next morning I went through my bank records. I did not do it because I planned to confront my mom. I did it because I wanted to know whether my memory was accurate. That turned into several hours of digging through statements. I found transfers I had forgotten about. I found direct payments to utility companies. I found grocery store gift cards. I found a cashier's check I had purchased for Melissa's landlord. I even found 2 transactions that I could not explain at first. Both were withdrawals for $1,000 each. I checked the dates. They were from 2 summers earlier. I remembered my mom asking me for emergency money around that time. She had told me Melissa needed help with her car. I had assumed she gave the money to Melissa. The withdrawals were made in cash. I could not prove what happened after that. That bothered me more than I expected. I called my mom the next evening. She did not answer. I sent a message asking if Melissa had been able to get the mortgage issue resolved. My mom replied several hours later. She said I was making the situation worse by refusing to help. I asked what exactly Melissa owed. My mom said it was around $7,500. I asked for the landlord's name and a copy of whatever notice had been sent. My mom said I was acting like a lawyer. I told her I was trying to understand what I was being asked to pay. She stopped responding. The following Saturday was my grandmother's birthday dinner. The whole family was going to my mom's house. I almost skipped it. My wife suggested I go but avoid discussing money unless somebody brought it up. That was exactly what happened. I made it through appetizers before my mom started talking about Melissa. She did not ask me directly. She talked to my aunt about how hard things had become. She mentioned that some people in the family had plenty and still could not be bothered to help. She talked about how children should never have to suffer because an adult was too proud to step up. I knew exactly what she was doing. I still wanted to pretend I did not. My aunt looked at me. I could see she wanted an explanation. I told her there was a financial issue involving Melissa and I had decided not to contribute this time. That was all I said. My mom became angry. She brought up all the times I had helped in the past. She made it sound like I had promised to support Melissa indefinitely. I told her I had never made that promise. Melissa was sitting quietly through most of this. That surprised me. Usually she defended herself aggressively. This time she looked embarrassed. Then she said something that changed the way I saw the whole situation. She admitted that the $7,500 was not actually the amount currently owed. The arrears were closer to $4,200. I looked at my mom. She said the extra money was for other expenses. I asked what expenses. My mom said Melissa had car insurance due. She had daycare expenses. She had a plumbing issue. She had groceries. I reminded her that none of those things were the mortgage. She said I was splitting hairs. I went home feeling worse than before. Part of me thought maybe I should just pay the $4,200, not because I believed it would solve anything, because I wanted the family tension to end. The problem was that every time I imagined paying it, I felt something inside me pushing back. It was not anger. It was exhaustion. I was tired of being the emergency exit for decisions I did not make. A few days later, my sister called me. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered. She sounded ashamed. She said she was sorry about the family dinner. She told me she had not asked Mom to involve everyone. I believed her. Then she admitted that she was behind on rent, but not because of the reasons Mom had given me. She had taken out a personal loan 6 months earlier to pay off some credit card debt. The payment was $540 a month. She had also been sending money to her ex-husband because he was behind on child support and she wanted to keep him out of trouble with the court. That shocked me. I asked why she was doing that. She said because their kids were seeing the consequences. She was trying to protect them. I understood the emotion. I did not agree with the decision. She told me she had tried to tell Mom that she was not asking me for money. Her exact problem was that the landlord had agreed to a payment plan, but my mom had already told him I would help. I asked what she meant. She said Mom had called the landlord. That was the first time I realized my mom had been speaking to people on my sister's behalf without telling me. I asked whether my mom had mentioned my name. Melissa said yes. She said Mom had told the landlord that I was family and that I would make sure the balance was covered. That made me angry, not because of the money, because she had made a commitment in my name. I called the landlord the next morning. I kept the conversation simple. I explained that I had never agreed to make payments on Melissa's behalf. He was surprisingly understanding. He told me my mom had called and said the money was coming. He said he had assumed the family was working together. I asked whether there was a written payment plan. He said there was. He emailed me a copy after confirming with Melissa that it was okay. When I read it, the numbers finally made sense. The actual past due rent was $4,175. There was a late fee. There were 2 utility charges that had been added because the lease required the tenant to reimburse the landlord for water. The total was under $4,500. The rest of the $7,500 my mom had demanded was not connected to the landlord at all. It was money she wanted to give Melissa directly. I asked Melissa about it. She broke down and admitted that Mom had been pressuring her to ask me for the full amount. Melissa said she was afraid of what would happen if she refused because Mom was helping with the kids. She also admitted that she had told Mom she could probably pay me back after the tax settlement. She had not signed anything. She had no guarantee the settlement would be enough. She had been telling herself that if I helped, she could somehow make everything right later. That was the first time I felt sorry for her without feeling responsible for fixing her. Those are different feelings. I had spent years confusing them. My sister asked whether I was angry with her. I told her I was. I also told her that I was more angry at myself because I had allowed our relationship to become a constant cycle of rescue and resentment. She started crying. I did too. We did not solve anything that night, but we finally talked without my mom translating between us. That mattered. A week later, I discovered something else. I was reviewing my credit report because I was preparing to get pre-approved for a refinance on my mortgage. I saw an old account connected to a loan I did not recognize. At first, I thought it was an error. Then I saw Melissa's name listed as the primary borrower. My name was not on the loan, but the address was my old apartment. I remembered that address. I had lived there shortly after college. Melissa had moved into that same apartment years later. The loan had been taken out around the time she moved in. I called the lender. They could not discuss Melissa's account with me. That was fair. I asked whether my information had been used as a reference or co-applicant. They told me they could not confirm that without authorization. I checked the credit report again. There was no delinquent balance attached to my social security number. It was simply an address connection. I almost dismissed it. Then I remembered something else. When Melissa had moved into that apartment, my mom had asked me to help fill out paperwork because Melissa was confused by the application. I had provided my pay stubs at the time because Mom said the landlord might need proof that the family could help if something happened. I had not thought about it since. I started wondering whether my information had been used for more than I realized. I pulled old copies of documents from a storage box. I found the rental application. My name was listed as an emergency contact. It was not a loan guarantee. It was not a co-signature. That was a relief. Still, the whole thing bothered me. Around then I started setting boundaries in a much more practical way. I stopped giving my mom access to my financial information. I stopped discussing my savings. I stopped telling her how much money I had in retirement. I stopped mentioning my mortgage balance. I also stopped paying bills for Melissa directly. When my mom asked me to send money, I told her I would only discuss it with Melissa herself. That created a new problem. Melissa started realizing she could no longer hide behind Mom. She had to face me directly. At first, our conversations were awkward. Sometimes she would call and spend 10 minutes explaining why she needed help before admitting she had not actually asked me for anything. Sometimes I would remind her that I was not going to manage her budget. She started using a basic budgeting app. She canceled 2 subscriptions. She sold a newer television. She took extra shifts at work. None of those things made her financially secure overnight. They were just small signs that she was finally taking responsibility. Then the tax settlement came. It was much smaller than she had expected. After fees, she received a little over $5,000. That amount was enough to cover the rent arrears and a few other necessities. Had I given her the $7,500, most of that settlement would have disappeared without changing the underlying problem. She paid the landlord. The payment plan ended. For the first time in years, I did not contribute. That should have been the end of it. It was not. My mom was furious. She stopped speaking to me for several weeks. Then she started sending long messages about how disappointed she was in me. She said I had become cold. She said my wife had changed me. That bothered me more than I expected. I knew my wife had not changed me. She had simply been the first person willing to tell me something I did not want to hear. I had changed myself, or at least I was trying to. One Sunday morning, my mom showed up at my house without warning. She looked tired. I almost felt relieved when I saw her because I had missed her. That made what happened next harder. She said she was worried about Melissa again. I told her I was not discussing money. She said it was not about money this time. It was about family. She wanted me to talk to Melissa because Melissa was angry with her. I asked why. Mom said Melissa thought she was being controlling. I told her that maybe she should listen to her daughter. My mom became upset. She said she had spent her entire life protecting us. I told her I appreciated everything she had done for me. I also told her that helping was different from controlling. She cried. I almost apologized. Then she said something that made me stop. She told me I had always been the responsible one because I was easier to deal with. That sentence stayed with me. I realized then that being responsible had become my role in the family. Nobody had officially assigned it to me. We had just all gotten comfortable with it. If Melissa made a mistake, I fixed something. If Mom panicked, I solved something. If there was a bill, I paid it. If there was a crisis, I was expected to absorb it. And whenever I objected, people acted shocked. It was like they thought responsibility was permanent. That was when I finally understood why I had struggled so much with saying no. I was not just refusing money. I was refusing a role everyone had gotten used to. My mom left that day angry. But something had changed. A month later, she called and apologized, not completely. She still believed I had been too harsh. She still thought I should have helped. But she admitted she had told people I would pay when I had never agreed to it. She said she had been desperate. I told her I understood. I also told her I could not keep having financial decisions made on my behalf. She agreed. For a while, things were calmer. Melissa stayed in the rental. She got a promotion at work. She started paying back small amounts of what she owed me. Not much. $50 one month, $100 the next. One time, she sent me $25 and apologized because it was all she could spare. I told her the amount was not important. The fact that she was thinking about it was. My wife and I continued saving. We put more into our emergency fund. We started a separate account for the future house. Our finances became less stressful because there was no hidden expectation that some part of our savings belonged to someone else. Then about 8 months after the original argument, my mom called me again. This time she was not angry. She sounded scared. She told me Melissa had received a letter from a collection agency. I asked what it was for. She said it was an old credit card. I told her Melissa needed to handle it directly. Mom said she had already tried. I asked why she was calling me. She said because the collection agency was claiming Melissa owed around $9,000. That sounded serious. I agreed to help Melissa understand the paperwork, but not financially. We met at a coffee shop. She brought the letter. I read it carefully. The debt was real. It was also older than I expected. Melissa had stopped making payments on that card nearly 2 years earlier. She had been borrowing money from other people to keep current on different accounts. The card had gone to collections after she prioritized rent. She was embarrassed. I told her I was not going to pay it. She nodded. Then I told her I would help her organize the documents and make a list of her options. That was different. For once, helping did not mean becoming responsible. We contacted the collection agency. We asked for verification of the debt. We reviewed the dates. We discovered the balance included fees and interest she had not understood. She negotiated a payment plan herself. It was not easy, but she did it. That became the pattern after that. Whenever a problem came up, I helped her understand it. I did not solve it. That distinction slowly changed our relationship. We became closer. Not because I gave her less love, because I gave her a different kind of love, one that did not assume she was incapable. My mom took longer to adjust. She still occasionally made comments about how I had become stingy. I stopped defending myself. There was nothing left to prove. Then came the part I never expected. A little over a year after the original argument, I got a call from a number I recognized as my mom's bank. They had contacted me because my mom had apparently listed me as a person to call in case of an issue with one of her accounts. I told them I was not authorized on the account. They apologized and said they had reached my number because of the contact information on file. I called Mom. She told me she had been trying to help Melissa with another financial problem. I asked what kind. She hesitated. Then she admitted that she had taken out a personal loan to cover some of the money she had given Melissa over the previous few years. I was stunned. I asked how much. She said around $12,000. I asked whether she had told me about it. She said no. She did not want me to worry. That was when I realized something important. My mother had spent years telling me that Melissa needed me because she was irresponsible. But Mom had been absorbing that irresponsibility herself. She had been borrowing money to keep the system going. That explained why every problem felt urgent. There were actually multiple people trying to keep the same unstable structure from collapsing. Melissa would fall behind. Mom would cover part of it. Mom would run short. She would pressure me. I would help. Then everyone would pretend the crisis had been solved until the next one. I told my mom I was sorry she was carrying that debt. I also told her I could not pay it for her. She said she knew. That was the first time she did not argue. She asked whether I could help her make a budget. I agreed. My mom was embarrassed. She had always been the person who told everyone else what to do. Now she was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of bills. We went through her expenses, her debt, her insurance, her retirement income, her credit cards, her monthly obligations. I found 3 automatic subscriptions she had forgotten about. I found an old storage unit she barely used. I found that she had been paying for a phone plan with lines that belonged to relatives who no longer lived with her. None of this was dramatic. That was the strange part. The system was not being destroyed by some giant betrayal. It was leaking money in dozens of boring little ways. We canceled what we could. We made a plan. She called the lender and negotiated a lower payment. She started rebuilding. It took months. It was frustrating. She complained. She backslid. Then she adjusted again. For the first time, I was helping my mother without handing her money. I was helping her become less dependent on me. That felt healthier than anything I had done before. My relationship with Melissa improved too. She eventually moved into a smaller apartment. She did it without asking me for a deposit. She sold some furniture. She used part of her tax refund. She asked her landlord for a payment schedule. She got a roommate for a short period. I did not love every decision she made, but they were her decisions. She paid me back the remaining $2,300 she still owed me over the course of about 14 months. One payment at a time. The last payment was $180. She sent it electronically with no explanation. I saw the notification while I was making dinner. I stared at the screen for a while. It was not the amount that mattered. It was proof that the relationship had finally changed. I sent her a message thanking her. She replied that she owed me more than money. I told her she did not. She was my sister. I wanted us to be able to be family without either of us keeping score. She said she wanted the same thing. I believed her. There were still setbacks. There always are. People do not go from years of bad habits to perfect behavior because of one argument. My mom still sometimes tried to guilt me. Melissa still occasionally made choices I thought were irresponsible. I still occasionally felt the old pressure to jump in. The difference was that I could recognize it now. I could feel that old urge and pause. I could ask whether I was helping or simply preventing a consequence. That question changed everything. About 2 years after the original fight, my wife and I bought the house we had been saving for. We sold my old place. We used the money responsibly. We kept our emergency fund intact. We moved into a slightly larger home with room for the family we hoped to build. My mom helped us pack. Melissa brought boxes. There was no argument. No one asked me for money. No one hinted about what I owed the family. We ordered cheap pizza because we were exhausted. My mom sat on the floor in our living room surrounded by half-open boxes. She looked at me and apologized again. She said she had spent years confusing fairness with equal sacrifice. She had assumed that because I could handle more, I should. I told her I understood why she thought that. Then I told her I could not live that way anymore. She nodded. That was all. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no speech, no perfect ending. Just two adults admitting that something in our family had been unhealthy. A few months later, Melissa got married again. It was a small wedding. She paid for most of it herself. My mom gave her some help, but it was a fixed amount that she had budgeted for months in advance. There were no emergency calls, no last-minute rescue. I remember standing there during the reception and realizing how different it felt. For years, family events had made me nervous because I knew somebody might ask me for something. That night, I just ate cake. I talked to relatives. I laughed with my sister. I went home without checking my bank account to see what the evening had cost me. That sounds like a small thing. For me, it was enormous. Looking back, I do not think my mom was evil. I do not think my sister was evil either. My mother was afraid. She believed that if she let Melissa experience the full consequences of her decisions, something terrible would happen to the family. Melissa learned that somebody would always catch her, and I learned that being dependable was a good way to become useful to everyone and invisible to myself. We were all reinforcing the same cycle for different reasons. That is why it lasted so long. The hardest part was not the money. The hardest part was accepting that I had helped create a system I was now trying to leave. I had ignored warning signs because every individual request felt reasonable. I had told myself that families help each other. That was true, but there is a difference between helping someone through a hard season and taking permanent responsibility for their choices. I had crossed that line years earlier. I just kept moving it whenever I got uncomfortable. The biggest lesson I learned was that boundaries are not really about making other people behave differently. They are about deciding what you will do. I could not stop my mom from calling. I could not stop Melissa from making mistakes. I could stop handing over my savings every time somebody felt anxious. I could stop agreeing to things because saying no made me feel guilty. I could keep records. I could ask questions. I could read documents before sending money. I could refuse to let someone make a promise using my name. And I could help people without taking over their lives. That last part was the one I understood the least at first. I thought saying no meant I was abandoning my family. It took me years to understand that sometimes saying no is the only way you can stay in a relationship without quietly becoming resentful. I still help my sister sometimes. Now it looks different. When her car needed a repair, I helped her find a reputable mechanic. When she had a question about taxes, I helped her find the right form. When my mom was confused about a retirement account, I helped her make a list of questions for the financial institution. I do not lend money casually anymore. When I do make a financial commitment, it is something I can afford to lose without damaging my own household. More importantly, I do not make financial commitments because somebody says it is the last time. I make them because I have made a decision based on facts. That sounds obvious. It was not obvious to me for most of my adult life. I thought being a good son meant being available whenever my family needed me. Now I think being a good son also means having a life of my own. My mom eventually paid off the personal loan she had taken to cover the past. Melissa stayed current on her rent. She built a small emergency fund. She stopped using my mom as the middleman when she had a problem. Our family is not perfect. There are still old habits. There are still uncomfortable moments. There are still things we disagree about. But nobody assumes I will fix everything anymore. And when somebody does accidentally fall into that expectation, I can tell them no without feeling like I have committed some terrible moral offense. The last time my mom ever used the phrase "one more time" was about a year after the move. She called because Melissa wanted to buy a used car. I expected the old conversation. Instead, my mom said she wanted my opinion about whether the payment was affordable. I checked the numbers with Melissa. We looked at the loan term, the insurance, the registration, the estimated maintenance. She decided not to buy that particular car. She found a cheaper one a few weeks later. I was proud of her, not because she made the choice I would have made, because she made it herself. After that call, I sat in my kitchen for a few minutes and thought about the version of me who had once believed every emergency required my money. I wish I could tell that younger version of myself exactly what I know now. I would tell him that guilt is not proof that you are doing something wrong. I would tell him that love does not require financial self-destruction. I would tell him to read every document. I would tell him to stop assuming every crisis was temporary. And I would tell him that when someone says this is the last time for the 7th time, the important question is not whether you believe them. The important question is why you are still being asked to prove it. I did not become stronger because I won an argument with my mom. I became stronger because I finally stopped arguing about promises and started looking at records. The records did not hate my sister. They did not hate my mom. They did not even blame me. They just showed what had actually happened. And once I could see the pattern clearly, I could finally make decisions based on reality instead of guilt. That changed my finances. It changed my marriage. It changed my relationship with my sister. It changed my relationship with my mom. Most importantly, it changed the way I saw myself. I was no longer the emergency fund. I was a son, a brother, a husband, a person with his own future. And for the first time, I understood that those roles were allowed to exist without one of them consuming all the others. I still love my family. I just stopped confusing love with rescue, and I have never once regretted saying no that day.